right, let's get this started. Good evening, everyone. It is 6:30. We'll call the Planning Commission meeting to order for May 27th, 2025. Kelly, can you please start us off with a roll call?
Okay, Commissioner Crosby,
Here.
Commissioner Lee,
Here.
Commissioner Malone,
Here.
Commissioner Zawalski,
Here.
Commissioner O'Leary,
Present.
Commissioner Pullen,
Here.
and Chair Wegener.
Here. Thank you very much. Next up on the agenda, or first up on the agenda, is the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which has been a quick minute.
I would move approval of the minutes unless you want to just consider them approved as written.
Well, normally I'd consider them approved, but I have a motion and I have a second.
Oh.
First from Commissioner Lee, second from Commissioner Malone. And so we'll go ahead and take it that way tonight. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All
I'll remember
opposed?
not to do that next time.
No worries. Motion passes. I like to mix it up a little bit. Why not?
It's only an extra sentence or two in minutes, not a
Yeah.
big deal.
All right. Next up on the agenda, we have requests from the floor. Any folks from the public who would like to speak to us? I do not see any online, and I do not see any in the room. So we'll go ahead and move right along to the director's report.
Yeah, so I'm gonna start doing something slightly different on these. I'm gonna put next meeting information like I've done in the past with tentative items as I know that they'll likely be. And then instead of having multiple pages of other information, I'm gonna typically just put a link to the most up-to-date WordPress site report, because we publish those monthly for the city council and for the planning commission as well. And then if in the future there's anything that I think is relevant to put that you need to know at the meeting that I didn't get into that report, I will include it on here for you. But I really didn't have much today. I will say one thing you'll see on the report next month that we just got notice of, I believe on last Thursday, was we were the second city in the state of Oregon to get approved for our adjustment request to the House bill that had requirements for approving adjustments and variances for all housing applications. So as part of that legislation, you can apply an exemption to use your local process instead of the state process in the legislation in the ORS. And so we did apply for that. We're the second ones in the state to get approved for that. The only other ones to get an approval so far is Salem. And several have got denials and a lot of applications are just kind of pending. So I wanted to give a lot of kudos to Rebecca because she did most of the heavy lifting on that project. Patrick and I also contributed some, but it was really Rebecca who wrote up all the materials that were submitted. It was probably 50-60 hours of work. So kudos, Rebecca.
And this is the one just that means that we don't have to do all the crazy variances.
We still have to do them. And we had, but now, so with how the state legislation worked, you had to approve 100% of the requests up to a certain number for each application, right?
Right.
With our process now, we can actually use the local process instead of the state mandated process, and we only have to approve up to 90%. So it does give us not total local control by any means,
Right.
but it does give us a little bit more local control and a little more local decision-making authority because we're using our process that we designed and we don't have to approve every single one of them. But we do have to be pretty selective on which ones we want to deny.
Right.
And there will be conditions that we have to meet. So we're gonna have to put some additional information on our website about it. And I think in the pre-app notes, we have to include a blurb that you can apply for a variance or adjustment, which we already historically put in there anyways, so we're not really changing anything there. On the next meetings, I just wanted to point out real quickly, the one in June, those are not really tentative anymore. Those are official because I've noticed them both to DLCD, which you had to do 35 days prior to the first hearing. So those have been noticed to the state, so those will occur on June 30th. And then on July 28th, that one is still tentative. I'm waiting on the Parks Department to submit all their materials. But I just heard earlier this morning, actually, that they plan on submitting them this Thursday or Friday. So I do think that meeting will likely occur, and that will be the hearing before you at that night. That's all I have.
Awesome, thank you, Kelly. Now on, Commissioner, Counselor Ramsay, if you have anything that you'd like to add in or give us a council report.
Nope, we got through the budget, extensive process, walked through, everybody was there taking part. I think that's about it. We've got the SDCs rocking the boat a little bit with our increases. I think we're probably gonna have further discussions on that. But other than that, I think we've all kind of been on the front lines together the last 4 or 5 weeks, so I don't really have anything that we don't already know.
Thank you. And just for a few you or maybe online who weren't there, thank you to a large portion of this body who did participate in the budget process the past few weeks. That's why kind of that last meeting was bumped to kind of make room for that process. And so thank you to those who participated. And then we'll open it up to any planning commissioners who have anything that's not part of the other agenda that they'd like to bring forward tonight.
Can you describe what the rocking the boat thing was? I can hear okay online, but I didn't catch what the boat was being rocked about.
We're getting some pushback, obviously, some verbatim from developers who are not real interested in us having a defensible increase in SDCs for water and wastewater for the city. And so I think we'll have further discussions on that and where that goes. I'm not sure going forward what that looks like. I'm fairly new to that process, but it looks like it's gonna be something we're just gonna have to kind of navigate as we go and as the attorneys let us know what that's gonna look like going forward. I'm confident that they are justifiable increases. Because that's how we have to do it within the law. So I'm not sure what that looks like and the arguments will look like from anybody. I just know that it's, it doesn't look like it's something everybody's really happy about on the development side. But, we're also in a moratorium, so there's a little bit of a stagnant factor to that as well. So.
Thanks for the clarification. No surprise that developers don't like it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, what I can say to it is pending litigation, so. Probably be wise not to say anything more than, I mean, I think what Christina said is perfectly fine. But probably just be wise not to discuss it too much more, and it will be discussed before the city council, I think, next as an executive session item. And that can legally be done within state law because it is pending litigation, so just want to let you know.
Did you say it would be executive session?
It will be, yeah.
just to clarify, I was going off the first information we got, not anything beyond like 2 weeks ago.
Got it.
But it was just, I mean, we knew it was coming. We got it when they were sitting here and it was pretty much the same language that. But you know, we're in a moratorium. You can't go retroactive, so. You know, it's like a rock in a hard place for everybody.
Oh, I would definitely agree with that.
So.
Thanks. Anybody have anything else? All right, let's move into, we have a work session on 2 sections of the code, fences and retaining walls and outdoor burning.
Yeah, so how do I want to start this? So I think I actually had a slideshow when we talked about this a year ago. I decided not to do that for tonight. As I believe at least 4 of you will remember, we had a discussion, I believe it was, I think I put it in the minutes here. Yeah, June 10th of 2024. And we discussed changes to the fences and retaining wall section. And we also discussed changes to the temporary uses and structures section. So just to remind everybody, we actually worked on the retaining walls and fences section like 11 years ago now. Jerry's the only member that would tell you remember that.
Yeah,
Um,
I remember it in fine detail.
So we did discuss it a long time ago. That's where the diagrams on the third page of this staff report come from. I actually created those like over a decade ago. So we did discuss it a long time ago. There was not, I don't think at the time, a ton of appetite to go forward with it. Then I brought it back forward because we keep getting requests, especially around the combination height of a retaining wall and fence, especially on lots that have a lot of topography change in town. It's very difficult to meet our code. And because with this new pending legislation that I just talked about a few minutes ago with variances and adjustments, if the request is made as part of the subdivision application in the future, that would be something
Everybody
that,
gets it.
well, it's
Or
not.
Can get it.
It's not listed as actually one of the ones through the state prescribed system. But if we decided to reject them in the future, it would be one of, it would account for rejecting 10% of the application. So I think just being realistic that in a city that's as hilly as Sandy is, that there's going to be a lot of cases where our current code does not really work in a lot of cases. There are subdivisions that are relatively flat that it does work. But there's a number of subdivisions just even approved in the last 5-10 years that we've had to approve adjustments for. I know there's a lot of people that have just kind of went around the rule. And to be quite honest, we've had so many of them that unless it's really egregious, we haven't really done much about it over the last 5-10 years. Because most of the time it's something like their combined height of the retaining wall and fence is something like 10 or 11 feet. And so we haven't really pursued most of those through code enforcement. We have had a few that have been up to like 20 feet and we have pursued those. So that,
How often do you think people, is it for for backyard fences too? Do they have to pull a permit if they're replacing a backyard fence?
that's a good question. So they only have to pull a permit is if it's over 7 feet in height. So the combined height.
So even if they're, say they had a 7-foot fence, they're replacing it with a 7-foot fence, do they have to pull a permit?
No permit.
Okay, but
Anything
if they're
over
replacing
7
a
feet.
7-foot with a 10-foot,
Yeah, then they would
that
that
have
would
to
trigger
pull
a permit.
Okay.
And then retaining walls historically, so one thing that I'll walk through you here in a few minutes is we're actually adding something to the code that the state building code allows, but some cities have chosen not to adopt. I think for our purposes, it's wise to adopt it because I think it's going to lead to a lot less confusion, and I'll walk through that in a few minutes with you. And then the other part of this is temporary uses and structures. That was really something that the city administration wanted us to look into more. So that was a code change that the city administration had actually asked the Development Services Department to move forward with. So that one didn't really come from council or Development Service staff or Planning Commission. That one came from city administration. So we've been working on these 2 code sections, one of them for over a decade and one of them for about a little over a year now. So since we met in June of last year, I did include a pretty exhaustive list of the main changes that were done to each one of these sections. So if you look on the first page of the staff report, fences and retaining walls, I'll just kind of walk through these. I'm not going to read them verbatim, but I'll just walk through them. So one thing that was analyzed in 2024, June of 2024, is that there wasn't a good definition of how to measure from the finished grade. So it's really simple. It's pretty basic, but I did add a sentence that just says fence and retaining wall height shall be measured from the finished grade upon which the fence is constructed to the top or fence or retaining wall. And I had the attorney look at that and he said that was clear and objective. And he thought that that's exactly what it needed to define how we measure it. And the reason why is we do measure height for buildings to the middle of the gable, but obviously fences and retaining walls don't have gables in most cases. So we had to define that. We added that fencing in the I2 and I3 zoning district shall be placed behind the required landscape buffer. So in those 2 zoning districts, instead of having sandy style, there's a landscape buffer to kind of shield or decrease the chance of seeing the structures behind from the right of way. So we added some language around that into this section that was discussed about a year ago to make that more explicit. The third one was actually not something we discussed last year. This is something that the attorney spotted when he was looking at this about 3 or 4 weeks ago for us. There is actually legislation now, and it's now in an ORS, that we have to allow wire fences with electricity charge in zones that don't allow housing. So currently, we only have 3 zoning districts in Sandy that's the case. Which is all the industrial zones. So he said to make us compliant with state statute, we had to add that. So we can talk more about that
It's
one.
not mandatory, but they can put it.
Correct. And our code before said anywhere in city limits, you can't have electric fences.
Because kids, they're kids.
Yep. So that's not my preference. That wasn't something that anybody at the city pushed. It was just legislation that was passed in the last couple of years. And then there was a court case and the city lost. They had similar code language to ours. That Josh actually worked with. So he just said, let's avoid a court case in the future.
When someone applies for that, would you tell them to have good insurance? Because
We
if
can-
someone gets hurt,
Yeah,
I don't care if it was permitted or not,
Yeah.
you're liable.
we can definitely hint at it.
Do they have to put up a sign that says that it's electrified?
You know, we would have to go to that ORS, but there were some provisions
should
around
have.
that, I think, in there,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly.
If they just put up a sign that says electrified, they wouldn't even have to electrify it. They
Yeah,
could
probably
just put
not.
a sign up,
Yeah, that's
just
an
like they do
invitation
it
to touch
protected
it.
by blink, or whatever.
Or watchdog or whatever.
I noticed it said hedges, side of, a hedge fence.
Yeah,
So there's no requirement, if your arborvitae that's forming your fence gets to be over 20 feet, you have to bring it. down.
the current code actually does regulate that. So it would say that it's not supposed to go. Does it say that? Yeah, the tree or shrub, this is already in the existing code. That
Mhm.
form of set obscuring hedge shall comply with the same height requirements as a fence
Yeah,
within the clear vision area. So outside of that, I think it can go much
so
higher.
that between between properties, it can be.
Yeah, it
higher,
can
As
go
long as
higher,
it's not
yeah.
obstructing the road or a stop
Correct.
sign or whatever.
That's exactly right.
Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
For, is there any restriction on invisible fencing? We're seeing a lot of that in some areas now, in rural areas especially, and now it's coming into some residential areas.
So does it sound like an alarm? I'm not
Yes,
sure what
like
that
a-
is.
It's for
Very
dogs.
wire.
Oh, I don't think so.
I mean, you can't see it, so maybe it doesn't matter.
Some use it for.
Unless you're
for
wearing a
dogs.
collar that's gonna shock you.
Yeah,
Well, I think we're all jumping into questions because I'm getting at mine too. Maybe Kelly, if you want to finish up. And then we'll
Yeah,
go.
I'll keep-
We'll just go around the room as the big whole thing afterwards.
I'll keep going through these. So I just wanted to give you a little more explanation of why some of these things were added, especially for the 4 members that were here. Here we go. So the last one on the first page is we added galvanized finish to add clarity to what that standard actually meant. That was a request from the commission. So this one, the first one on the second page, this is one that we just added a few weeks ago. We actually had, I'll just say because it's an active code case. The food carts in downtown, the owner of the food carts put up plastic mesh.
Hmm.
And it, with ace buckets and concrete, and to me, it looks very tacky. Thankfully for that approval for the food carts, we had a clause in there that they couldn't install anything without approval from the city, so they're gonna be changing it. But so because of that, we had to add this clause because we don't want random plastic fencing. That's actually just intended to be for grading permits to be thrown up as permanent fencing all around the downtown. So we just added that like a week or 2 ago because of that case. We added that retaining wall shall have an architectural grade finish and consist of warm earth tones such as gray, brown, or tan. This was discussed a year ago. We didn't really land on anything specific, but there was a desire to have not like really high level sandy style retaining walls, but to have some component of what they can look like and what they can't look like. I think it could probably be considered that most people wouldn't want a retaining wall right next to them that would be like hot pink or something crazy. So that's also why fences and retaining walls shall not have high intensity primary colors. And then the last one under that subsection is something we talked about a year ago. To have some standards around what retaining walls can consist of and what they can't. As I've talked to the commission in the past, we had somebody that built a tire retaining wall once that we advised heavily against. It was holding up a lot of dirt. It was about 10 feet tall. And then about 3 years later, it broke and the tires went tumbling down the hill and kind of took out a bunch of different stuff. We've also had some railroad tie retaining walls. We actually have one in downtown right now. And what they do is they're not engineered, so over time they're going to fall over. So we really want to eliminate those as well. And then we did add the new subsection with the building code requirements.
I'm curious about a retaining wall of refuse,
What's that?
of refuse.
Any junk, yeah,
Oh, junk, okay.
Yeah.
Garbage,
it could be.
bags of garbage.
It really could be bags of garbage, it could be
Like sand.
Washing machines.
washing machines, it could be shoes, it could be anything.
Is it safe to say that all that garbage won't last longer than a year, especially if we had our say about it? I think it's pretty cut and dry. It's anything that's not gonna last longer than a
Right.
year.
Yeah. I mean, the problem is if, so, and that's something I wanted to talk to you guys about, so. If you go into. And if you want, Chair, what we can do is stop there. And we
That's
can
what I was
talk about
thinking.
fences and retaining walls before I go into temporary structures and
Yeah.
uses.
That's perfect.
So what you will see is if you go all the way to the. I'm just gonna jump all the way to the last page on retaining walls and fences. So this is the question that Commissioner Malone was asking about. So it does currently say in the code that fences in excess of 7 feet in height require a building permit. So we're gonna leave that. But what we are proposing is that retaining walls greater than 4 feet in height have to get a building permit. So in state building code, when I started in land use and state building 20 years ago, there in the state building codes division, it was actually law that prescribed that any retaining wall over 4 feet in height had to get a building permit. What they've really done is they've stripped that back and back and back. And now, as long as it's not holding a building surcharge or a public right of way or utilities, you can put it any height. And so what it really does is it creates a problem, because this is where we've had issues with, it's not holding a building surcharge, but then somebody puts a 6 or 8 foot tall retaining wall made out of tires that we all know is going to structurally fail within a few years. There's also a lot of confusion around it, because we've actually had a few homeowners come to us and just said, I really just wish you would just process a building permit, because we don't know yet what the final height is going to be. And we don't really know if it's holding the surcharge of our house up or not. And so what it's put our building official in is an awkward position of going out to their house, trying to determine whether it's holding up the surcharge of the house or not, which puts the city out of liability risk for making that assumption. And then the homeowner, some homeowners will just go do whatever they want, but the ones that are a little bit more meticulous around the law and around insurance, they don't want to do anything that might violate their homeowners' insurance policies. So they want our opinion of like, oh, should this be engineered? And our advice typically is, when in doubt, probably you should get it engineered for the safety of your own house and your insurance policy more than anything else. So this is just a suggestion. We don't have to include this, but we're just saying basically, let's rewind the clock back to 15, 20 years ago. And let's just require a building permit when it's over 4 feet in height.
Could we require a building permit and engineered drawings for something like that, or is that out of line?
I think you could. I think how we've currently written it is that it may require engineering as specified by the building official. So Terry, our current building official, he's really good about pretty much knowing when it needs to be engineered or not. So if it's, say it's a 5 foot wall and it's likely not holding surcharge of the building, he'd probably tell him it's really on you if you want to get engineering or not. You know, if it's a 16 foot wall, regardless of what it's holding, we would always recommend getting engineered plans done for that.
Recommend but not require.
What's that?
Recommend but not require.
Yeah, so we could suggest strengthening that language where it would be required. But this was the language the building official suggested, is what we wrote in here. But I'm open to anything on it. I wanted to point it out. I think it's actually a really difficult thing to kind of. I almost wish we had like some of the discussions recorded that we have at the front counter over the years of how confused people are when we try to explain this. It's the state really intended to reduce the building permit requirements, but what they really did is they've confused a lot of people. And a lot of people don't even know, like, is it holding my house up or not? I don't, it's downhill in my house and it's holding up the dirt that's supporting my house. So to me, like, that is a surcharge, right?
Right.
You'd think so.
Or is it a retaining wall that's on the side of your house, but maybe everything falls into your neighbor's yard and ruins all their stuff, like, or into a creek or, all those other sort of things.
And so we did have a retaining wall right before I started here, actually a few years before I started here. Commissioner Malone might remember this. It was off of Sandy Heights by Sioux Lane, and somebody actually built a retaining wall without it. Do you remember this? Without a permit, even though he was supposed to at the time. It fell and crushed a pickup truck and destroyed a bunch of other stuff in this person's backyard. And then there was like a big lawsuit. I read this stuff from back then. And then the city got pulled into it because somehow we missed. Well, I think they just went and did the retaining wall without checking with us. So we're trying to prevent situations like that. I don't know. It's a difficult one.
So in my experience as a construction manager, a wall that's under 4 feet tall would be referred to as a landscape wall. And anything over 4 feet would be a retaining wall. And best practice is to have engineered drawings. For instance, a railroad tie wall can go, 8 feet or better if it's got properly installed dead men to hold it up. But if you just stack railroad ties, it's not going to work. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on. And I think the state code used to actually refer to it as something like a landscape wall or something like that. So, yeah.
I'm old, so that's probably where I got that idea from. I like the idea of having engineered drawings over a certain height, but I don't know the limitations of what we can do. And it's different when you have a professional out there that builds walls doing it versus a homeowner who's likely capable to do the physical work, but doesn't really know like what it takes to build even a railroad tie wall.
Now, given this is like right next to your house, is it ever helpful at all to get the original engineering drawings of your house from the home builder or the city, wherever that might be?
It could be, by state law, we only hold on to the originals for 2 years. And then we send out a notification to the homeowners saying,
One.
yeah, if you want it, come get it. Otherwise, we're gonna shred it. And the reason why is we just don't have the capacity to hold all the permits. We don't have any storage big enough. And then we did actually try to scan them, but it was taking like,
Can't really put it on a thumb drive.
I think it was like 7 hours a house. So it's like, this is not doable either. So,
Give it to them, let them put it on a thumb.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, in a perfect world, of course, but we just don't have the house plans.
All right, let's go around the room. Anyone want to start? Questions, thoughts? Grammar corrections?
I unfortunately did mine early, so.
Jerry?
Yeah.
Yeah, Jerry usually catches our grammar.
Yeah, no, I haven't, but the one thing, the question I have is just what we were talking about. I was just waiting to open things up. On a retaining walls, and here's where where I live. And across the street from me, those houses are just against a bank that goes up 100 feet. So to build a retaining wall there is not, I don't think that's a building surcharge. I think you'd have to, I mean, it's part of the hill. But I would want it, I think one of my neighbors did one that was
So
like
what, I,
16 feet.
I will comment that one of your neighbors is currently out of compliance with the code.
Okay,
Because some of that is handled by a separate section of the code, which talks about disturbances to hillsides of greater than 25% slope. And you're supposed to get a geotech report showing how to build.
okay, so that's almost a secondary thing. My concern is that something like that, a retaining wall out of the backyard that's just somewhat there for aesthetics, but also somewhat to prevent the sloughing off. That I would want it to somehow trigger somebody to say, this needs to be engineered. I mean, it's really tall.
It is.
And I'm sure, and it makes sense. I mean, you have this back of your house, backyard, it goes straight up. And so I don't know if there's enough in here that would trigger, because reading it, it's not supporting a building surcharge or a walking surface. So I could read that and say, I'm good, I can build it myself. Doesn't need to be engineered, right? Other than the disturbing of the, if you did disturb the existing,
Chair?
that's just the thought.
All right, it's that's not the only one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
I just, were you around when the hillside collapsed into the Mayor Bill King's
yeah,
auto repair place?
I think that happened the year before I worked here.
And we had worked on the sidewalk up above it. I think there was a lawsuit or something involved in that.
Sounds right.
Yeah,
It's like the year before I started here, yeah.
but I don't believe there was any retaining wall. We just might have put too much. I don't know, but
I
it
don't
was
know
not
either.
good, and I think that's why you ran for office. So thank you.
All right, anybody else have any before? Yeah.
On Senate Bill 974 that sets out all these new conditions for expedited housing and takes away some of the authorities, like not taking something to the council, just being a type 2 and coming to the planning commission only on appeal. Do any of these ordinances, would any of these require us to not pursue them, or are these pretty solid, and even for expedited housing, we could still have them in place?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think we could have all these in place, and the reason why is because even the most stringent of these would only require a building permit. None of these technically, unless you're asking for a variance or adjustment to go even above what we're trying to put in place here, it would all be done administratively by staff.
Yeah. you would
But that's a really
probably
good point.
stand on them unless somebody challenged us.
Correct, then it would go on appeal to the commission.
Yeah,
Yeah. But no, that's a good thing to keep in mind whenever we're passing new code now. Especially with that new legislation in place.
that's all I had.
Commissioner Bowman.
Yeah, I wanted to check in about the fencing conversation. So I remember talking about the galvanized fencing, and I remember it specifically because later we talked about home ownership and especially starter homes, getting younger people in our community. So when I saw this here, I'm looking at the cost difference between galvanized and the black chain link, and it is significant. It's $50 per, which doesn't seem a lot, but that's per 50 feet. I don't know why do we need that to not happen for people, for our citizens? Why do we need to add that extra cost to a homeowner wanting to add a fence to their yard?
Yeah, you certainly don't have to. I think my opinion on it is that front yard fencing with galvanized finish for the most part is pretty bad looking. If you go through different subdivisions in big cities, especially where they have a lot of front yard barbed wire, or not barbed wire, but front yard chain link fencing that's galvanized and then gets rusty. I think it gives a really bad impression of those areas typically. It's also, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, but I think it really creates kind of a standoffish feel too. like don't come into my yard kind of deal. So personally, I wouldn't ever advise anyone to put galvanized chain link fencing in their front yard, for those reasons.
Resale value.
Yeah, plus resale value, that's not what anybody's looking for when they're looking for a house. I mean, not anybody I'm aware of at least.
No, I agree. My personal preference may be one thing, but I mean, we're here talking about our goals with home ownership and property ownership and making it affordable. I want to consider that when we talk about adding these sorts of requirements that are preference based.
So one thing I would say to that is, I think if you're really looking at it from an equitable lens for homeownership, the cheapest, most affordable solution is to not have a front yard fence. I don't have one, I haven't had one in either house I've owned in Sandy, and I don't think anybody in my neighborhood out of the 40-something houses I don't think anyone has a front yard fence. So I think that the most affordable solution would be not to put a fence in at all.
I think for majority, I would agree that I think most people just choose not to have a front door and it's kind of, or a front yard fence and it's optional. I think it comes into play most when we have lots that face
Transit Street?
yes, that's the one, thank you. You know, where it's the fake front of the house. You know, it's really their back of the house, but it's the front of their house.
Yeah.
I think that's where it comes into play, although I think that that is maybe to Commissioner Poland's point, those are often in the neighborhood, in the new subdivision, the least expensive of the houses, because they don't have necessarily a true backyard. But to Kelly's point, they're also the most visible houses in the neighborhood a lot of times too. And those houses would set the tone, I think, for that neighborhood as well.
But in those kind of subdivisions, if they're subdivisions, the builder usually puts that fence in.
That part
It's
of it.
not the homeowner, it comes
Yeah.
with the cost of the house because it's installed by the
Yeah.
builder.
Yeah, and a lot of times in recent land use decisions, as some of you will remember, we've actually went above and beyond what we would typically require and required like specialty fencing along transit streets. Not that we require the fencing, but we say if you're gonna have fencing along these transit streets, we want it to be metal
Like this.
or
Mhm.
something. And we've done that. Timberline Trails had that in it. Jewelbury Ridge had that as a condition. Sandy Woods Phase 1 had that as a condition. So we've trended on actually going above what this would even be requiring on recent land use decisions that the Planning Commission has heard.
I wouldn't have any, I don't have any problem with a front fence, and I agree, it's rare. Even a chain link one, if it was like 3 feet, I think that just, but I say that at that point, however, I do know, as Kelly says, it is an absolute given that they will rust and look tacky. And then what do? You know, what do you cite them with? You know?
You could have a code that says rusted fencing will then have to be replaced.
Yeah, you'd have to have a piece of code. We'd have to have
And
that
you'd
there,
have to
but
have a
there,
couple
it's,
other
it's
code
not
enforcement
there right
officers.
now. And, but I also walk by someone who has a front yard fence that's one of those, plastic ones. I mean, it's real nice looking,
Mhm.
but it's the PVC or something like that. And it's got, green mold on it. So, you know, what do you do there?
Yucky.
So it's
live in Oregon,
easier to say just, you know, don't allow it. I think they are rare. Those that do it probably are more for pets.
Yeah, some cities don't allow front yard fences.
Mhm.
I could send them to a couple neighborhoods in Gresham that have a lot of chain link in front.
Yeah, I think for me, at least thinking about your comment, because I thought about the same sort of thing. It's a cleaning issue versus a replacement issue. And I think it's much more affordable to be able to clean that in the future than it is to try and like tear out or replace.
Yeah, the plastic one you can clean, but
Yeah.
a chain link one, you gotta paint,
Yeah,
cause it will rust.
yeah. Neither one look good though, when it's all dirty like that. All right, Commissioner Pullen, did you have any other comments, questions?
Nope, that was my fence comment.
All right, I'm gonna take the liberty then. I have a couple. So Kelly, I just want to make sure. So what we're proposing is we previously had I could do fence not to exceed 8 feet. We're proposing a we're maintaining that 8 feet. But if they add a retaining wall, it can now go up to 10 feet. And if we have a 2-foot setback, it can go up to 12 combined feet.
Yeah, and that's consistent with the diagram on that page of the
Right.
report. Yeah.
So if there's a 2-foot retaining wall and then 2 feet, someone can now build a 10-foot fence.
I'm sorry, what was that?
So you have a 2-foot retaining wall,
Okay.
set back 2 feet for your fence. You
Okay.
can now have a 10-foot fence.
No. And the reason why is because the last part is very important. So retaining wall or fence cannot exceed a total individual height of 8 feet.
Okay,
So if you read the whole thing, it says the total combined height of a fence or retaining wall shall not exceed 10 feet. With the fence or retaining wall not exceeding a total individual height of 8
individual height
feet.
of 8 feet.
And then if you go to the next one, it does the same thing.
Okay,
But just
That, because that's the important clarity, because otherwise, yeah, you could have a 1-foot retaining wall and then an 11-foot fence. and it's
Exactly.
like, that's not what we're really trying to achieve here.
okay, right.
It's trying to achieve a higher maximum height when you need the retaining wall, like the combination.
Yeah.
Would
So
you-
something like that preclude the retaining wall like this around the Burger King drive-through?
I wouldn't think so. So that's probably, I don't know how tall that is, but by this code, you could have an 8-foot retaining wall with a 4-foot fence on top, which you have to have at least a 42-inch. If somebody can fall based off the retaining wall, the code's 42 inches, so we just went to 4 feet.
It's a huge retaining wall.
And an 8-foot retaining wall is a pretty big retaining wall, so if you needed to go above that, you would ask for an adjustment or a variance. For Burger King, say they needed to go to 10 feet, we grant it most likely, but you'd have to go through a variance
I
process.
think it's higher.
Section C there, so we had residential and then we had commercial. And maybe it's defined somewhere else, is recreation area defined?
Recreation area, I don't have to look at our definitions.
References a court. right?
I'm just curious, because I mean, okay, if I put some cement in a basketball hoop in my backyard, does that allow me to build a 12-foot fence? Or is this, I mean, I think the intent is mainly like commercial areas, parks, apartment buildings that are building a basketball court, those types of things. I think that's what the intent is. But,
I get your point.
It's
Yeah.
under,
well, I mean, I had a basketball hoop and a basketball court in my house. I would have loved a 12-foot fence, so I didn't have to chase the ball into the neighbor's yard. It would have been great. The neighbor probably would have loved it too, but it would have been a really tall fence.
Yeah, I don't know, I mean, what do you guys think? Would you want it to be more limiting or more potential properties that could apply that code section? Would you want it to allow it for anybody that has a recreational court, independent of the use of the zone? Or do you rather it be more limited? Because I
I
agree.
would rather it be more limited. I wouldn't want my neighbor to have a 12-foot fence. He can chase the ball on my yard, no problem.
I think that's, for me, as much as I think it makes sense, I think that's the way just to err on the side of caution.
I do agree, though, I think it's a little bit vague, so I think we'd have, if the commission wants us to define that better, I think we'll have to define that more.
Okay. I think that would make sense. Sorry, I'm gonna have one more kind of like that. Swimming pool, hot tub areas, does this apply, and maybe I missed it in there, to just in ground or above ground as well?
It would apply to both.
Okay.
This is actually just state legislation that we just brought into our code decades ago.
So anybody with a patio, hot tub, technically should have this fence around there.
Yeah, are we enforcing it?
Sure. Okay,
But
mean,
a
with
fence
that, you
around
know-
the yard would work, right?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
or would it be, because don't they have to be able to get to, like, if you have a kid coming out of the house, does it have to stop you from?
Swimming pool. I was just thinking of a hot tub.
Right, but as far as
Maybe it's
this
the
is.
same thing.
Yeah, I
Or-
don't, I've never, I don't know, that's a good question. I can check with our building official. I've only ever seen it apply to pools. So maybe that's the clarity. Maybe it's really fence regulations just for swimming pools, not hot tubs.
Well, that's why I'm thinking kind of that in ground, it's to stop people from like running out the back door into a backyard and like falling into the pool. Is what I thought the intent was.
I mean, your homeowner's insurance definitely wants you to have a fence around the pool.
Yeah,
Like, even if you have an exterior fence for your yard, they still want another fence around the pool
Exactly.
within the yard. I don't think everybody does that,
yeah.
but I think that's what they want you to have.
Mhm.
And that's kind of what I thought this was trying to describe is that other fence blocking the pool. It's like just around the pool or just around the hot tub.
So your above ground pool would probably be 4 foot high anyway, wouldn't it? 4 feet off the ground on the side.
I would think maybe,
Yeah.
but does that count as?
Yeah, do you have to put a fence around it?
Doesn't it have something to do with the depth of water?
It's 18 inches.
18
If
inches,
it's more than 18 inches.
but a hot tub is still even if it's a-
Definitely more, yeah, I think hot tubs are supposed to be fenced and just everybody turns a blind eye.
That'd be a very shallow hot tub if it was.
Yeah.
That's a footpath.
People tend to file permits when they add a hot tub to their backyard. I don't think so.
Not often.
No. Don't
You're
even,
supposed to apply for an electrical permit, so whether they're doing that or not, I don't know, because that goes through the county. But I think you're probably right that a lot of people just put them in. And almost nobody puts pools in Sandy. I think there's
It's
been,
clay.
one application for a pool since I've worked here, like a big, like in-ground pool.
yeah, there's no room for it. Becomes.
You use it for like a month and a half a year.
Yeah,
Tonight you could have used it, I guess.
Great, oh, that's all
I
mine.
will ask the building official on that one, because that is a really good question. We'll get some more specification around that. And what the state building code says on that.
sometimes for something like that, just an idea suggested, those diagrams can be helpful.
Hmm.
I mean, if you had a diagram with a hot tub, and if in fact that fence is supposed to be within so many inches of the hot tub. In a one eyeball and a picture of it, even of a yard that has a fence around the outside, you automatically know. It has to be a separate fence.
Yep.
It just real quick, whether or not we wanna add, diagrams for everything, but. A picture like that would give instant clarity. On an issue that might be kind of. Fuzzy to a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely true. I think the one exception to that with the diagrams is. With all this housing legislation now, unless you can make the diagram clear and objective, then it actually, you remember that from the
Yeah,
clear and
yeah.
objective discussion. But yeah, in something like this, it's not a housing thing like, you don't have to have a hot tub, to have a house.
Yeah. Just thought.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I'll check in with the building official. So on Commissioner Poolin's comment or point, was there a consensus to look at that further, or to change that, or to leave it as is, or just trying to make sure I'm getting the,
Reading the facial expression, simply please tell me if I'm wrong. I read, leave it as is
Yeah, as
on
much.
each basis.
Yes.
Okay. All right, any other last comments for fences and retaining walls?
oh, I'm sorry, and then one more point of clarification on the last one for retaining wall height. Was there a consensus to require engineering for walls above 4 feet, or to leave it as is, or? I think that was something Commissioner Crosby brought up towards the beginning of the
My
discussion.
question on this, is there a height or a situation where this starts to make sense in almost all cases? I mean, 4 feet
Not that tall.
is not that tall, but then again, it could be like,
15 might be tall, 20 might be tall, taller than a person.
yeah, you know, is it 5 feet? Is it 6 feet? Is there a spot where it starts to make sense where like 55% of the time, you know, it really should get a engineering? So I'd hate to, I mean, I don't want to add cost to a building, just add cost, but there's a huge safety piece with this.
And is there a middle ground? Here's what I'm thinking is a 4-foot wall. Some may be inclined to just stack those blocks
Mhm.
without anything. And could it be that there was some sort of a code that would say, you know, you use a concrete block cement or something like that to a height? It doesn't have to be engineered. You don't have to go get somebody to sign off, but at least at that. And as you're saying, then at some other height, then it needs to be looked at with some more educated eyes.
Right, a 2 foot could be retaining wall, could
Because a
be
4-foot,
anything, a 4 foot has to be this building style or better, and
Yeah.
like a 6 foot has to be,
because a 4-foot could still be made dangerous.
right. I mean, especially if you're on a steep enough incline, you know, in 4 feet
Yeah,
of.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if, I think that's hard to answer because I think the
Yeah.
height is less relevant than what it's holding.
Right.
Load it's holding
Right.
back.
Yeah,
What surcharge? So if it's I'm just gonna draw something real quick here. So if it's a retaining wall. Let's just say that's 8 feet tall.
you're able to switch the camera, Kelly.
What's that? Yeah.
It's not that I know they'll be able to see it, but we can try.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can't see that at all. Or I can do it,
on the board.
I can do it in black and I think that might help. Okay, so as long as I go towards Patrick. Okay, so there's an 8-foot wall here. And the surcharge it's holding, say, is on a, not too much of a slope, so it's like this. The total amount of surcharge is gonna be much lower. Than if it's, say, a 4-foot wall. But it's holding up an embankment that's much steeper
Right.
and it. From the forces of gravity, I'm not a physicist, but this
Yeah.
is pushing down more load probably than that in most cases.
Yeah,
And the other thing too
Yeah.
is like, if this thing fails, but all that's here,
There's a driveway.
exactly, or a yard.
yeah,
But in this case, there's like a
Back
structure
door.
right here, little house. Which is very small compared to the 4-foot wall.
It's where the elves live.
Yeah, exactly.
dwelling unit.
Or our sandy hills.
Yeah.
I don't know, there just could be much more consequence depending on what's below it
Single
too.
member
yeah.
Exactly.
To me, we're kind of proving the need for an engineer to at least glance at it. To the point of, does a 4-foot tall wall need engineering or not? The soil type is a critical component too. Some soils would probably benefit from an engineer. Some soils would probably stand without any retaining wall other than erosion. So there is some point where, you know, us applying our own logic to it with however much knowledge we have, it really is individual situations, and that's what drives the need for an engineer to look at it at some point. Even if the engineer says, hey, you're fine, whatever you build you want, you know, so that it's somebody else's liability. At the same time, I do agree with the commentary about not driving up people's costs needlessly. That's a lot of weight in that wall of soil behind a wall.
Yeah, Commissioner Leary brings up a good point I almost failed to bring up too. I think I mentioned this last year. Is that currently in the state of Oregon, there is no such thing as landslide insurance, so. If you were to build one of these things and it fails and it destroys stuff,
You're out of luck.
your insurance holder is gonna say, good luck. That's a landslide. We're not gonna get involved in this.
Well, could it be worded such that it requires a building permit and no, it does say, and may require engineering, so it's right there, so you give a building permit. and the inspector comes out and says, no, I think we need to have an engineer look at this.
But then that,
So that's allowed.
That's how it's currently written.
right, but Kelly was mentioning that puts us in an odd spot of if we don't require that and it did need an engineering permit, that's on us,
Yeah,
or vice versa.
No.
yeah, I
And
think
it's
it
also
also,
not clear and objective.
true. So I think that puts us in another potential tangle.
Sure, I know that just from past experience, there's a lot of slump areas in the city where they say, if there ever was an earthquake, this area is just gonna liquefy and run down. I mean, we have quite a few of those areas because of the topography and the soil conditions, subsoil conditions. Do you consider those things when you're doing permits for new housing or? you
Not
have that
typically.
Do you have that overlay?
We do, not typically because we have no ability to through state building code. However, in a few instances where we do know that that's the case, when we're doing the subdivision or the development before the building permits, we have required additional geotech analysis.
Okay,
So in a way we have, but not on
right.
the building permit level. Yeah, there's one of those in Salmon Creek Estates, actually.
There's one in my backyard.
Oh, is there? There's one in Salmon Creek Estates, and before they built the townhouses, we did make them do an extra step geotech analysis, and actually that made them put up more robust retaining walls behind them. I think they were like a foot thicker than they would have been otherwise.
Good to know.
Should we
So, yeah.
seek any outside professional advice on how to word this retaining wall and engineering type stuff?
Or even maybe just talk with Terry and see if there's a experience number.
I mean, I think the safest thing to do is just if it's over 4 feet and you're getting a building permit, that you get it engineered.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I agree.
It takes out the potential liability the city would be involved with. It removes the issue of potentially not being clear and objective.
Oh, it's an old building.
Mhm.
Yes, and it does have a little cost, don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, like Commissioner O'Leary pointed out, is if it fails and it was constructed to the engineered specifications, it also gives a lot of protections for the homeowner.
Mhm.
So in some sense, we're actually looking out for them.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think the West Hills are a good example. At some point, people decided to build all the stuff they built there. And it hasn't gone well in many instances.
All right, Kelly, do you have all you need?
I think so.
All right, let's do temporary uses or structures.
Okay, so this one, I'm gonna try to go through this one a little quicker. I think it's a little less complicated. What you read is what it is. There's not as much discrepancy to walk through. So as you'll see on the temporary use and structures, a handful of these were added at the direction of the planning commission when we met a year ago. I think there was actually more comments on this section, if I remember correctly, than there was on the fences and retaining walls. So the majority of these were added because of comments and suggestions from the commission a year ago. I think there was one or two added by Patrick and I and other staff members as we were just kind of reading it again and again. Such as F, where we really got a lot more specificity around who can declare it as an emergency for a retroactive permit, similar to the hazard trees that we have in our code. And you know, that one's actually something that just occurred a couple of years ago when we had the forest fires in Estacada. The Forest Service asked me, hey, can we dump these trailers on the parking lot that AC owned that we now own? And I said, just do it. Like, just do it and we'll figure it out later on. And so this will give them a way that it's been declared as a state of emergency by the governor of Oregon. They can go put them out there and then retroactively apply for a permit.
That's when they were in the movie parking lot. and all
Exactly.
that, Yeah.
And then we also had another instance of this when COVID occurred. The funeral home had too many bodies and they had called me up and said, we don't know what to do. And I said, well, do you have a solution? They said, yeah, we can get a cold freezer thing, put it out in the parking lot. I said, just do it. And then we'll figure it out later. We'll figure out the permitting, we'll figure out everything else later. Just because I didn't want it hitting the paper that we denied the funeral home during a state of emergency. Two, I really felt bad for the families that were experiencing these deaths, and I want their loved ones to be like I wanted them to be probably taken care of. So there has been a few instances where this has actually come into play very recently, so we definitely wanted to get a clause in there around this. And then the rest of them are, I think, pretty self-explanatory, the changes. So I think if people have questions, we can just kind of walk through it.
Yeah, awesome. And I'll say that I very much remember this conversation, and I think it captured what we talked about pretty well overall. So yeah. Anybody have any questions, comments? Yes.
It looks sort of like it's trying to control or preventing homelessness structures like in the public right of way, derelict trailers, some of the things we've seen, say, on the Foster corridor or wherever. I don't want that happening here.
Yeah, I'll just be very honest, it wasn't intended to do that, but I think it could help.
It could
in
help with
it.
that.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely not gonna hurt.
No, tools, all the tools.
Correct. But yeah,
Muster.
I just want to be honest, that was not the intention, but I do see what you're saying. So yeah, it's definitely could help in that regard as well. If we do start to
A
see,
tool for code enforcement.
correct.
I'll jump in. I just have 3 quick ones. A3, the temporary use shall be monitored to ensure there's no disruption. How are we monitoring and who's doing it?
Should be monitored by the applicant.
Okay.
Yeah, because we have no capacity to do that ourselves. I'll add some language in there.
Speaking of kind of emergency uses, B1 shall not include any overnight accommodation. How does sheltering come into play with this?
Sheltering for,
Emergency.
you mean if it was like FEMA tents?
Sure. Yeah, tents or trailers or whatever it
Yeah.
happened to be, or it doesn't even necessarily have to be about sheltering, but just, workers coming into town. And, this was the base for a firefighting operation. You have, folks setting up.
Or we've had an earthquake and your house is not stable and you just want to put a tent up in your front yard so you can sleep.
Yeah,
Sure, I wasn't thinking that small, but yeah.
I think if you wanted it to say something along that, I think it would have to be tied to the emergency provision in 6.
Right,
So we can do that.
okay.
I was
I think
wondering if there should be an exemption for a disaster of some kind. Like the earthquake that Jerry was talking about.
I think a lot of it's covered in what Kelly
In the
said on
6.
number 6. Except for the sheltering. Piece that was
Right.
there, and I think in the event of something like an earthquake, I think we're just gonna say, sure, why not? Like a big earthquake, but I'm thinking more
It's gonna be-
realistically, our yearly. Firefighting operations that are springing up all over the place that, might realistically have something nearby.
Yeah, we can add a provision that, except when it falls under this provision.
Okay.
I think what we're mainly trying to do there is like,
No, I totally get you don't want people just sleeping in their fireworks stand or whatever it happens to be, like.
I was gonna say carnies, but,
Sure,
I guess I did anyways. We did have a case where we believe somebody was sleeping in a job trailer recently, and we heard the person passed away in it. And we're trying to prevent we just heard that secondhand, so I don't know if it's true, but we're trying to prevent those kind of situations.
Mhm.
You mean like car camping, carbon monoxide poisoning kind of stuff?
Well, or just people camping basically on job sites. I don't know. If I was a neighbor of that job site, I would not be a fan of that. There's really no reason for it. You can put up proper fencing or proper storage so that material doesn't get stolen. Which that site is now done, so it's now been protected better.
Go
Yeah.
back to that That one we were just looking at overnight, does that mean my grandkids can't sleep in a tent in my backyard?
Well, those don't apply for temporary structure permits, so. Similar to lemonade stands, I'm not gonna address the issue with that. Technically, by the building, by the business license code, until we just got those new amendments passed a month or two ago. We're supposed to be pursuing all those, but we actually got that into the code that we're not gonna pursue.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't do it for tents though, because that's a real slippery slope.
Mhm.
It, like, I wouldn't put that in the code.
Yeah, yeah.
Cause we can't legally define what is family, so I wouldn't wanna put any provisions around tents.
Yeah, and that particular scenario is up and down so fast, you wouldn't even.
Yeah, it's like one
know it
night.
happened,
Yeah, it's like one night, yeah.
maybe even part of the night.
You just have to put a fence around it.
If they hear noises in the middle of the night, yeah.
And then my last one, portable outdoor storage unit. Speaking of, do we, I know this kind of came up in the past, do we anywhere define what that actually is? Could this be a, big metal container? Is it a broken down car that we put tools in, or anything in between?
I don't know if we have that defined or not. We'll have to look into that more.
A box truck in your backyard
Yeah,
rusting out,
an old
but. old
RV.
tools. Mhm.
You
Yeah, I
know,
think a freight container would be temporary though. I mean, if it's heavier than a ton.
I doubt we have that defined. But we'll look into that more.
And not more than 60 days, so it's not gonna.
It was mainly written for like those pod things when people are moving out. I added this to the code maybe 10, 12 years ago. C wasn't in here before then. And we were getting a lot of questions around it then, because that's when those pod things started popping up in Sandy a lot.
mhm.
So we added it, and I was just looking to make some additional modifications to it. I didn't like a few of the things I wrote a decade ago read when I reread it. But yeah, we can definitely look into that more.
Those are my only three. All right, Kelly, unless you have any other clarifications, I think we've made it through that one. Yeah, we're moving right along to outdoor.
Yeah, it's not defined in our definition section. So we'll probably just add something here, so we don't have to modify that section as well.
Mhm.
Okay, you guys ready to move to the next one then?
Absolutely.
You want to take this one, Patrick?
It's got your name on it.
Yeah.
You're stuck with it.
So, I guess this has been tossed around quite a bit, to come up with a little bit more defined outdoor, burning code amendments. If you looked at what we kind of expanded from, you can see how, vague it was in all of the descriptions, and how it really didn't, address a lot of the issues that the fire department deals with. And I think that's kind of where a lot of this stem from, because we're not the ones that would ultimately be enforcing this, the fire department would be. But we still want to be aware, so we can kind of be the ones that referral to them to go and address certain things, or at least call to attention some of these violations. Because a lot of what was already out there, we just incorporated into ours. So there's kind of on the, I think I highlighted a section here, but it was, a lot of this was taken exactly from Clackamas County Fire Code, Sandy, fire, set number 72, ORA, OAR, state code, so regulations. So we all just kind of took it, kind of piecemeal from everything that we felt would apply to a city of our size. There was a lot of other stuff that really dealt with, stuff for county, since a lot of it did come from Clackamas, there was a lot of it that addressed or defined what agricultural burning was. So we took a little bit of that because of what we realized, that we do have a certain amount of parcels that could be, still used for farming, for small farms or leftover farming that's still inside the city limits. So we had to at least address that. But for the most part, it was really just kind of taking a lot of regulations and requirements of common sense that just would apply to anybody with that would be burning something in their backyard. What it doesn't get into, I don't believe, I think we took it out, was your typical like backyard burning, like backyard like small bonfire where you're doing like s'mores or hot dogs or just sitting around with your family members and your small. This is more for people that are burning landscaping materials, leaves, branches, sticks, basically, or like vegetation from your backyard in large amounts. So we wanted to kind of define that a little bit more. And I think in the staff report, I mean, you pick up anywhere you want, but we thought we just kind of outlined a little bit of a couple of items where maybe to topics of discussion that we really wanted you guys to weigh in on. As far as quantitatable stuff, size of lots, distance from structures, distance from back there, from property lines, stuff like that. So I guess maybe even a fine amount, but I think more of it was just to kind of get a little bit more input on what we were all saying. Is that far enough away? Is that too far? Is that too restrictive? I mean, if you look at it from when you're looking at a quarter-acre lot or above, you look at that as being over 10,000 square feet. You got quite a bit of room, but it just depends on what else is in your, not just your yard, but whether you have some topography that's limiting that space, or you have, already a stand of trees that's already in your backyard. So other kind of anomalies for shrinking that down. So I would say start wherever you guys want. Look at what we already outlined for topics for discussion. And see if there's some issues, or if you guys can come to consensus.
It's gonna go for a workshop with the city council. We just give them recommendations to the city council for a workshop.
That's correct. Yeah.
Correct, yeah, this is something in the city code, but still, we still feel it's important for you guys to weigh in, like to hear what you want to say.
Number 5, it says, B5B must be located in property at least 1 acre in size. How many lots do we have that are 1 acre in size?
Yeah, so we
The
ran,
lot limit a few years ago was 7,000 square feet. I mean, I have a pretty big lot and it's only a third of an acre, so.
yeah, that, what Patrick said summarized it pretty well. We're just basically taking what other jurisdictions manage under, so the fire district, DEQ, the Oregon Department of Forestry are the 3 bodies above us that regulate this stuff. And the Oregon Department of Forestry only regulates according to the fire marshal slash piles. So as you'll see, that's been added to the code.
Right.
The fire marshal looked at all this and made some edits, and our attorney had a heavy hand in making edits as well. As Patrick pointed out, a lot of this is already existing code language. We're just incorporating it into our local code, and now we'll have like an ability for the police department to go and find somebody if they're violating these code requirements. In addition to anything that DEQ, ODF, or the fire district would do, and that was at the direction of city council. They made this one of their goals to have this updated.
I think sometimes we're probably the first person. They don't necessarily call the fire department.
Exactly.
They call the city.
That's exactly
Well,
right.
my neighbor's burning a bunch
That's
of weeds
exactly
in his
right.
backyard.
Yeah.
So I think one thing to consider is like a lot of this stuff we can't really change. And that will be, I think, something that's a little frustrating probably for the council. Or at least a couple of the members that wanted to visit this, because a lot of this is mandated.
Dawn.
A lot of this is mandated by these other agencies. So all we're doing is incorporating their mandates into our code.
Mhm.
What Patrick did is identify a few of these where we believe we have discretion. So the minimum lot size, the distance of the burn piles to structures, which is really more important than the minimum lot size. The fine amounts and what we'd want to set that as. The size of the burn piles, which we believe we have some discretion over. It can't be, I don't think larger than what the state code allows, but it could be smaller. And then burn time, so they require that fires are extinguished 2 hours before sunset. We couldn't do, I don't think, anything less restrictive, like we can say they have to be put out by sunset. We could say 4 hours before sunset or something like that, so these were where we believe you have discretion.
These are the parameters.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so, one thing I'll add is, as Patrick said, this is not really dealing with like backyard outdoor fire pits and stuff like that. That is in number one.
Yeah, that was my question.
Yeah, so it's in number one, it's exempted, as long as they don't exceed 3 feet by 3 feet.
But it says, my question was as long as it's used for cooking.
Uh-huh.
So does that mean as long as I keep a packet of marshmallows, my fire is good?
Yeah.
You know, or like,
I wondered the same thing, because we
I
have
think,
fires just for sitting at the fire.
I think you can burn materials in there, so as long as it's not larger than 3 feet by 3 feet, the area that you burn them.
But it specifically says for cooking.
yeah.
It would apply for
'Cause if
cooking
it-
only.
Because if it doesn't, then it would apply to one of the other types of fires, in which case it has to be put out 2 hours before sunset.
Right, but I guess my point is like, you could chop up your yard debris into such a small amount that they'll go into a 3 by 3 fireplace.
Right.
And then use that for cooking.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
but
you'd be
what-
accomplishing both things. You'd be
Right.
But what
having
I,
a fire pit plus getting rid of some of your yard debris.
But what if I didn't want to cook anything?
yeah,
Technically, you'd be
you,
out of violation then.
So I didn't keep that bag of marshmallows close at hand.
so what, so what you're saying is, like, I have a fire pit in my backyard. And what this is implying is that I can't just cut up firewood and have a campfire at night and sit there around the campfire
Well, that's how the code was already written.
I'll buy the
without,
marshmallows.
without cooking.
So I didn't add the cooking. That was in your current code,
Yeah, I
current
know.
municipal code.
But that doesn't seem like it'd be a fire district or the state, but that's just our current code.
What if you can't afford food? And here's another question.
The council could change that.
You're not
They
gonna
could
like
Make it
this.
where you can have just a fire.
So let's say you don't like your neighbor's
Fireside
cooking.
chat.
B1 says smoke from the fire must not have a noxious odor. Well, what if I don't like the smell of their food?
B1. Oh,
I mean, I know you're talking about like not throwing trash into it, so I guess maybe
Like my
maybe
neighbor did
take it down a notch and
Maybe
just,
define noxious.
simply say the point that, keep hazardous materials away from your fire. That's probably sufficient, like in 4B or something like that.
Because noxious odors is subjective.
Very.
Yep.
I'm
So-
very-
you could definitely strike that or recommend striking that.
So let's take a quick,
Let me answer Commissioner Malone's question first here. So, because I think this is something important and I don't want to lose track of it. So currently the code says 1/4 acre. I was asked by a council member to look into larger lot sizes, so that's what we've done. So 1/4 acre, our GIS analyst said that there's 927 parcels currently in city limits that fit that. If we went to 1 acre, it would go down to 309. And if you went to 5 acres for like the agricultural burning, it would go down to 83. And so these are all parcels in city limits, including
And most
city
of it on
owned.
the outskirts,
Mhm.
not in
And some of these are, the big parcels along like Tickle Creek Trail and stuff like that. We didn't parse it out to see what was private and public.
Some of them are ours.
Correct.
Most of them probably
Yeah.
are ours.
So that is what you're looking at. If you're going from a quarter acre down to an acre, has been requested at council, you're cutting in about a third. You're going from 927 lot parcels in city limits to 309. That can do outdoor burning.
Which what we read is pretty common, that the smaller lots, neighborhood lots, there's no outdoor burning allowed. And in most of them just say within city limits. We're giving a little bit more flexibility because we still have larger lots inside the city limit or inside the UGB, but still outside the city limits. And even stuff that gets brought in doesn't get developed right away. It's still used for farming or whatever. So, and they got a lot more upkeep. But for something where I think if you live in a regular subdivision, there shouldn't be backyard burning.
If you've
To-
got a
to
neighbor, you
extent.
can do it without impacting your neighbors. If you've got a little 7,000 square foot lot, or whatever, a quarter acre, you're not gonna probably be able to do it without impacting your neighbors.
Well, with that, most people would want to do it would be in the fall, when the leaves fall and stuff like that, which actually makes it even more dangerous,
Mhm.
because now there's so much more combustible stuff
Yeah.
around your neighbors' houses, you know?
Real-
So I think with just what, you know, what it's allowed for what you're saying is having an outdoor barbecue place or a
Campfire range.
campfire ring or just, I mean, there's all kinds of smaller apparatus that you can, you know, throw cut wood in and it kicks out. And that's less than 3 by 3. But when you start getting into large burning areas or up to, or more than 3 by, just say anything more than 3 by 3, but up to even 10, it's a little much for a regular lot.
Yeah,
And, I mean, a quarter acre is still a quarter acre, but again, there's 900,
Yeah, no, it's-
but I think there are a lot more, compromise than maybe typical urban areas, because Sandy's got has got a pretty good, you know, tree inventory in the city too, so.
realistically, what, I mean, assuming we stick with the 50-foot to any property line or structure, so, you know, roughly 100 feet in any, you know, across, what property size, assuming it has a structure, and obviously things can vary, I mean, what's our average lot size that we're looking at that you need to actually maintain that 100 plus 5 or 10 feet for the burn pile, that 110 feet between a structure and a property line?
Well, I mean, think of a quarter acre, is a little bit more than 10,000, 11,000 square feet,
Right, so
100 foot by 100 foot.
100 foot by 100 foot, so you're almost, if you put a structure on that, there's almost no way you can maintain a 50
Mhm.
by, you know, on all sides, 50 feet on all sides.
Yeah.
So realistically, you're probably
Yeah.
looking at least a half an acre, right?
It's like you're allowed to, but you can't.
Right,
Not to meet the parameters of what they say.
of what's in there, yeah, so I mean.
Well, that's
realistic-
part of it. A lot of these numbers got moved around. We went through this so many different times. That's why I'm glad you guys are looking at it that way, because before it was 25 feet. Before it was a quarter acre, 100 by 100, roughly,
Right.
it could be, you know, it could be 70 by 130, I don't know, whatever like that. But it was 25, so you didn't have that. So it's nice that you're helping us kind of understand that, yeah, you go up to 50 foot. Now you've just eliminated a whole section that we're actually regulating that has no chance of probably ever being, you know, an issue. So, yeah, that's one aspect of it, but these yeah, we bounced these numbers around, we all threw our numbers in and then they got jumbled up, but I like what Kelly just said, that, I mean, you're still, for 906 lots, you still have 309 lots that are an acre or above. I would say, I mean, an acre, you got a lot of stuff going on in your property, a lot of trees that you could burn and you probably should be burning. I like the idea of allowing that, putting that at 1 acre. Anything else that's subjectable, to probably being in very close proximity to your neighbors.
What you use your green bin for?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll have to say though,
Or take it to the dump. I mean, people
Yeah.
take it to the dump, or they have a friend that lives on an acre and say, hey, can I bring it over there? Right.
I have a lot that's much, much smaller than an acre or half an acre, and I fill up that green bin pretty darn quick.
This is just with, like, if you had a lava rock fire table, this doesn't apply to any of that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
No, Kelly, is the code mostly oriented towards people that have property? So what about like homeless warming fires? And I asked this because my CPA's office burned down because somebody had a warming fire right next to a structure. How are we
There
gonna
you
address
go.
stuff like that?
Because how can they comply
So
an
currently,
acre?
They don't even own it.
currently your code is regulating that because it's saying for cooking. There's the argument not to take out cooking, because once you do that, how do you regulate warming or recreational fire?
Can we put it a certain distance from structure?
Yeah,
Yeah, is that a right though? What,
but then what if they
Am I
move it
missing
away
something?
from their
Is that
trailer
right?
out to that grass area where they're allowed to park down on industrial? They move it under those tree canopies. If it's 50 or 100 feet from their trailer, if it can't be near a structure, then it's further into the grass, the dry stuff.
But they don't own that.
Yeah, that's.
Um,
No,
And I'd
They-
much prefer. out in the
They're
middle.
also not reading this code.
Yeah,
Right.
very true. They're also, I'd much prefer it in the middle of the field than up against the building under the awning. And I think we have to look at, I think to Commissioner Pullen's point, we have to look at it kind of mostly there, and I think there's other use cases and probably other sections of the code that would prevent items like that. I would be okay with, saying within a certain feet of a building. I think keeping in mind a lot of these are on patios and they're small and they can be little tabletop things or whatever, not going crazy with it, but not having that open fire under the awning makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
To me, if we wanted to go that way. But sorry, Kelly, to get back to your point, let's,
I
I'm
just
gonna
want to
go,
say though on that, if you guys want to suggest it, maybe write it in there.
yeah, I
There's no way,
think,
there's no way to regulate that though,
sure,
because if it's a movable device.
it's
There's
just,
property.
Around and.
Yeah.
I don't know.
all right, I think to create some kind of order in all the things we're talking about, let's start with lot sizes and distances, since I think those are one thing, and then we'll move into a couple of these open questions that we have in the document itself, and then we'll go back to fine amounts. So just going back to lot sizes and distance, the suggested is 1 acre, 5 acre, and 50 and 200 feet. Does anybody have any reason to or want to suggest something other than that?
I don't.
All right, that seems like a consensus to me.
So how we currently have it written.
How it's currently written, yeah.
Or proposed.
For the council to.
Yeah. All right, moving to kind of, I think the next piece was this outdoor recreation. There's a thought to potentially remove cooking or kind of put some other parameters around this. Again, this covers things like barbecues. So I don't want to say put 15 feet from a wall, because I think having somebody's barbecue in the middle of their lawn is a little excessive. But, again, I think maybe.
you could say cooking, you can keep cooking, but you could just put comma recreation.
Yeah, used for, yeah, and I think that was my original thought on here, outdoor recreational are to be by 3 feet used for cooking, yeah, or recreation, I think was what I was gonna have.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
While you're on that point, I'm wondering about a code or regulation that would require some sort of a designated fire. I'm thinking more for fire safety and getting out, you know. When I got mine 35 years ago, I bought a 3-foot or 4-foot concrete collar for highway department. You know, so it's contained in there. As opposed to just building a fire someplace. I'm just, again, throwing out thoughts. That's something that would require, I'm thinking of the outdoor recreational fire, no more than 3-foot by 3-foot. I don't know how we'd word
I think what we're
it.
gonna
It may
be,
not be worth it.
what I've been thinking about, and I think what you're getting into is trying to regulate common sense. And I think that becomes increasingly difficult.
Well, it's like this, you know,
Yeah.
a campground. They don't, you can have campfires, but they don't say you can have anywhere you want on your campsite. No, they put something there that is designed to contain it.
Right.
Yeah, growing up, I never had anything that was established. It was always just nice field stones,
And that may be,
but
I don't know. I'm just wondering about it is. I don't know how many people in the city limits have a campfire ring, you know? But not a lot, cause it's.
I have one, but we don't use it anymore.
I
We
mean,
go to our neighbor's house that uses them more often.
could you just say? I mean, would, a designated. What'd you call it, fire ring, would you?
yeah, that's where I don't know how to word it.
Because I don't think you necessarily need to have, let's say, a fire ring. They do lots of them that are done in like,
Fire pit.
In a non-combustible,
you know, stone that are.
Just
Done.
the language, the word fireplace is in there. Isn't that kind of the same?
I think,
that could be, we could,
Or-
I mean, we could fall back on that and just say
What's
that's,
the fire in a fireplace?
I think fire pit also kind of describes a designated like
or
campfire
outdoor
area
fire pit, and that's, I'm. fine with
versus,
that.
you know, the middle of your yard.
If, you know, that we understand it that way, then
Yeah,
that's fine.
And that fits your use, right?
Yeah, yeah. And the one other thing, this is sort of off subject, but related to that, the very same things. When we have fire bans, it's been confusing to me in the past as to whether or not, having a campfire is banned when we have, fire bans.
Are you
So-
talking about a fire ban for smoke reasons?
No,
'Cause they're definitely banned for during those,
What, the fire department puts on it,
no,
things are
more
too-
for,
for air quality.
Yeah.
for, fire when it's extremely dry.
Oh, you mean like on the 4th of July every year?
Well, the fire department puts them up.
I think,
And I'm just saying this to alert
Yeah.
maybe the city that when you say don't have any fires, that they need to specify and no backyard campfires. Just so that it's not
I don't
confusing,
think it
they're
addressed
just
that, but I think
dangerous.
you're right, it did. I think the smoke part of it, the environmental part of it would fall under that.
Well,
But not
I
the-
can get some serious sparks out of my little 3-foot campfire.
So I don't,
my interpretation of that, Jerry, has always been that those campfires do apply as part of the ban. What you're allowed is anything that's propane gas based, so you have to be able to turn it off. If you can turn it off and it
That is
disappears, you're
specifically
good.
specified.
One of an expert in.
When there's a fire ban, campgrounds don't allow fires. You could have a barbecue pit, but not an open.
Yeah, so like, if
So
it's a
how-
propane fire pit.
Yeah, right, I understand that,
Yeah.
I'm just,
So I think it even outlaws things like charcoal that you can't just turn off.
I don't know if that's clear when they say that there's within the cities, because sometimes the fire bans are outside the city limits.
Right.
And the city sets its own fire bans,
Is it?
and I just we want to make sure that those kinds of things are picked up too,
Mhm.
so that we don't I mean, I could start a
I
good
mean-
forest fire out in my backyard.
I think the second sentence in that is the important sentence. All such fires must comply with all applicable law, including but not limited to regulations of the fire district, DEQ, and the Department of Forestry. So I think they set what is allowed or not allowed during bans for fire safety and for air quality.
Okay.
Because what I would hate to see is us add more specificity in here around that. And then for the fire department in certain circumstances, say, actually, no, that's, it's everything, or no, it's not these things. Because when it comes down to it, they're kind of the agency that's,
Okay, so that's who the citizen would contact.
if you have a question about it, as the fire marshals told us in that email, just call the burn line and see whether you should be starting a fire in your backyard or not.
Okay.
I wouldn't think it would ever apply to like a barbecue set or a pellet stove or anything like that. But yeah, if you're like doing the recreational fire with the marshmallows, I know for DQ, you're not supposed to when there's like a air quality
Air
thing.
quality ban.
And I think different circumstances would warrant if you're supposed to light those during the fire ban or not, is my guess.
Mhm.
Well, a lot of those type of fire bans are, where you guys were saying, like even campfires.
Yeah.
You're talking about campgrounds, you're talking about, there's the Department of Forestry that.
Mhm.
A lot of Clackamas County falls under that. But Sandy doesn't, we're outside of it, completely outside of it, so there's a lot of those regulations that just don't even apply to us. We don't have to worry about a Department of Forestry ban, because we're not in their jurisdiction. So,
See, yeah, well, that's the AR or view, so I shouldn't rely on that, but this says, depending on where you are in Oregon and depending on the specific burn ban, it may or may not be allowed. Which I know just added a ton of clarity to this conversation.
Well, that's fine, we can move on.
All right, so I think our only change to this would be adding recreation.
Or recreation.
Yeah. All
I
right,
think Commissioner Jaworski had a good point on the second page, I think.
yes, I was gonna,
Oh, okay, sorry.
no, you're good. If you want to remind us all what that is.
Yeah,
Because
he
I
said-
remember there was one more
He
thing
said
from him, I don't remember what
B1,
it
he
was.
said he thought we could strike B1 because B4 basically defines things that would make a noxious odor, and I do agree with him.
I agree as well.
So I think B1 could be struck, as you
Any
said.
opposition?
No, I had one other thing back on A4E.
All right, 2 seconds.
Yep.
Just double checking, no opposition. I wanted to get people a second to catch up. Okay, so
A4E, burn piles may not exceed 10 feet in diameter and 3 feet in height and shall be done in a barrel or on the ground cleared of all vegetative growth. Is that clear and objective?
It doesn't need to be because it's not a housing.
Okay,
application.
okay, good, because I was wondering, how far do you have to clear the
I
vegetative?
get, I
growth?
get your point, yeah. Yeah, it wouldn't have to be clear and objective.
But is it clear? On the ground, cleared of all vegetative growth, does that just mean underneath where you're burning? Which I could see that that's what it means.
Yeah.
Just underneath where you're burning,
ground cleared up, yeah.
that's fine.
I think it's to prevent it from just spreading.
And you're supposed to have the hose ready and all that.
Yeah, because that one's a special permanent one, so I imagine that there's even more
Inspection.
pieces that you're supposed to comply with when you file for the permit,
Yeah, we don't issue that, it would be the fire department.
you know?
a lot of this really puts the onus on the person that's starting the fire to call to see if there's a ban, to see if there's a DEQ, smoke ban or something. Most people are, it's not gonna be a big deal, but or something that the city is gonna get a phone call, it's gonna be after the fact, or it's gonna be at night. And they're gonna be addressing it the next day. It's gonna be a scenario where. You might get a visit from. Moody, Sergeant Moody, he might lecture you or something the next day because it's not, you know.
You messed up.
Yeah, unless you're doing a big burn pile in your residential lot. In the middle of the day, you might get somebody over there right away, but. If you're doing fire at night or something like that. I don't think you get too many people calling in on you, you know, or if they do, it's like, who's gonna go out there?
I mean, the police department might get dispatched depending on the size of it, but yeah.
How many neighbors complained?
All right, fines. So proposed as a class A infraction at 1,000. Kelly, are you able to, or Patrick, speak a little bit how this fits into the rest of our kind of code enforcement fine structure?
Well, it's brand new. So before, everything was just a $500 fine throughout the municipal code unless otherwise specified in the individual sections. So when we adopted the new fine schedule with the new citation amount, infraction amounts in December, we set a class A infraction at 1,000, a class B infraction at 500, and a class C infraction at 250. And then any of them can be doubled if it's a repeat offender.
So this would
And
classify
then that's
as
per day.
the more serious of the offenses then.
Yes. And the reason we set it at that, and the reason why I say it's kind of new is because we haven't actually done too many code updates where we've set the new rate yet. We're still working on that. So like business licenses, for example, we set that as a class C infraction. This, we're thinking if you're violating this and causing a potential fire concern that the police department feels strongly enough that they're gonna fine you, we thought it should be the highest amount.
And is there still discretion?
By the judge, but that's it. Yeah, it's just like getting a speeding ticket. Except that this doesn't have an upper and a lower, just has one amount, so that we'd come out, issue you a citation, and then you either just pay the $1,000 fine, or you can go before the judge and request a lower fine amount.
I like that you
And
have a
crime.
continuing violation. Because in some instances, people will think they get fined once, then they won't get caught.
Yep. Every day, and then it can double too if you are a repeat offender.
Yeah, thoughts from the group on class A, should it be lower? Is that the right amount?
Mm. I think it's about the right amount because of the property damage it could cause other people.
Needs to be a good deterrent. To something that could go off-site and hurt something.
Yeah, and how we do code enforcement, both development services and the police department. I can speak to how they do it too. Typically, we're not looking to go find somebody $1,000. If it was something egregious,
Egregious.
sure,
And I
and I
guess
think it
that's
should be.
what I was kind of asking about with the discretion.
But if it's like you violate one of these rules and you get called and Kevin or one of the police officers go out, more likely than not, they're just gonna give you a warning and say, please don't have this happen again, here are the rules. If it's something really bad, yeah, they're gonna slap you with a fine, and that they probably should. Because as Commissioner Lee just said, you could be putting people at jeopardy there and their property.
Yeah, if you had a fire and it got out of hand.
Or if they go out and there's it's like a 20 by 20 foot area that you're burning and the flames are 30 feet high. In my opinion, they should slap you
Should
with
know better.
$1,000 fine instantly. Yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that it says upon conviction, to me, says that it has gone to a level beyond just a complaint, like Kevin's said, that or Kelly has said, that the officer has taken it for, that's where your discretion comes in. I think,
Right.
You know, this is
a real,
this is more than just a warning.
yeah. Okay, I'm seeing agreement, so let's go ahead and size of burn piles. Proposed not to exceed 10 feet in diameter, 3 feet in height.
So this is what the fire department told us to put in, and then they told us, well, you could make it smaller, but then you would be the only jurisdiction in Clackamas County with a different regulation than we ordered. But we wanted to put it in a discretionary item because it is one that you could make it 8 feet by 3 feet, which I'm sure the fire marshal would love.
And Don may want it to be 6 foot by 2 feet.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, any desire to suggest something otherwise? All right, finally, burn times. Currently set for 2 hours before sunset for agriculture on backyard, so just. The last one's not the cooking / recreation. Realistically, I mean, maybe this is a question nobody in the room necessarily knows the answer to. Those fires are big and smolder for a while. What's realistically extinguished look like? Because I mean, in my thoughts, they burn for almost days before somebody goes out there and has to like move them
Not if you
around.
follow Smokey's regulation.
Yeah, you can't walk away from anything that's on fire. You-
Sand
Right, I mean, and
above the
that's-
Water and. you just-
I know what you, I know what you're
Prepare
saying,
if
because
you're
if it's,
willing to start
if
the
it's
fire,
in your
you gotta
backyard and
means
you
to
had
put it
some
out.
pretty hefty things you were burning
Yeah,
and or wanted to burn, it used up a lot of water.
yeah, I mean, going back to my fire pit, you know, just putting that out, and making sure it's good and out before I go inside, like that's. With me with the hose for 10 minutes sometimes on just
So
a small area.
Get a
think on
bucket
these
of
big ones-
sand.
I think on these big ones, yeah, I think Commissioner Malone's correct. I think you're supposed to not just use water. I think you're supposed to use dirt or sand.
Right,
That is, I think, how the fire department, like if you've ever seen a fire department put out an illegal fire, like out of somewhere in Oregon, they come and they cover it with dirt in addition to water.
If you've seen the commercials that are coming out right about now for smoking,
Oh, did they
That's
do
what
that
they
in them
show,
too?
yeah.
Yeah.
prior to the summer season, this is what you should have, a shovel, a bucket of sand and water.
We have a shovel in here, didn't we? Did we take the shovel out?
Yeah, I think that
Yeah.
got taken out.
So it's a 3 foot height of the burn pile.
Yeah, that's the way it should be.
So it's the 3 foot height of the burn pile from the bottom of the hole or from ground level, if somebody has a hole.
I don't think it got that specific in the Clackamas County regulations
This
that I
one, you
remember.
have more than 3
Yeah,
feet
all
tall
right,
of
stay
leaves.
away from it,
Yeah, I
but-
think
well, or
it's
is it, that's another good
pretty
point.
tall vegetation.
Is blaze
Leaves or
included,
branches or
or is
whatever.
it 3 foot tall of debris and then blaze 5 feet high?
Oh,
I took it to be the
pile
the
itself.
burn of
The
the pile.
pile is 3 feet.
Yeah, the pile, it says, you know, I'd like to see 3 feet. And that's just how it's exactly worded, I think, in the Clackamas County.
Yeah.
I would say above grade, because what you're saying is if somebody that's
Dig a
dug
hole,
down
now
in
you
the
got
pit
6
3
feet
feet,
of crap in there, yeah.
and now they've dumped in 6 feet of material, that's gonna be a hotter burn too. Part of this, you know, if you think about it, is 3 feet to 6 feet,
But who
you're
wants to
talking
put
two
a
different
hole in
types
the
of
backyard?
fires. You're talking a lot hotter, a lot more fierce.
Bury their
So,
trash.
so Brandon could have a point there as far as.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's probably 3 feet above, but yeah, you have a pit, you already have a big pit. That's a way more intense fire.
Yeah.
But how many
So
people,
it'd be 3
how
feet
many
from
property
ground.
owners in Sandy dig a
3 feet
pit
from
and bury
ground.
their debris or their trash? We just don't. People aren't burning their trash, they're burning their yard debris and their branches and
I mean,
that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
They're
where
not
I grew-
burning their trash.
where I grew up in Central Oregon, where the ground, you can dig up a 6 foot deep pit in about 30 minutes. People did it there. Here though, unless you have a backhoe, you're not digging into our clay.
And Sandy, if you're gonna knock somebody out, you're gonna dig a shallow grave.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
This ground is clay.
After 30 minutes of digging, you get
That's
about
good
an
enough.
inch in.
Put some leaves over that arm.
I mean, we can look into that further. I don't think it actually specified for underground or above ground or at. I don't think
Maybe ask
there's
somebody
anything.
else, plenty of clarification.
Yeah, you could
It's
just ask.
interesting to find out what they think of that.
Yeah, what's-
Yeah.
Yeah, we can ask the fire marshal.
I think just for clarity, our intent though, and I think everyone wants it to be at 3 feet
Yeah.
total, right?
Max above
From the
ground.
Or
ground.
just
yeah.
3 feet from wherever it starts to wherever
Yeah.
the height is.
And you dig a 3 foot
Yeah.
hole, but you can fill it to the level.
Right, exactly. Okay,
Yeah, I think that's the intention,
yeah.
but yeah, we can ask them.
All right, and lastly, anybody want to change burn times?
I think that-
Alrighty,
Yeah, I think it's 2 hours before it's pretty
Yeah.
standard.
Yeah.
Up there.
So, I have a question, Mr. Chair.
yeah,
I have about 3 hours of homework to do for the budget committee tomorrow. I agree with all of the goals. I wonder if you guys might excuse me and,
I would agree with all the goals too.
pardon?
I agree with all the goals too. I think we should just say,
Yeah, I think
We
we
agree,
went
we're
all
done.
through it.
Well, I guess, 2 seconds. Kelly, is there anything more you need before we kind of transition?
No, I think we're good. We
Okay.
have a couple
I have
changes.
one thing that just came to my mind. On the, we say that it's 2 hours before sunset. But I call the burn line, for burn pile we have at the office. And they often will say when it has to be extinguished by, and I don't know if that's 2 hours before sunset. But they'll say your burning is allowed today between the hours of 8 AM and 5 PM.
and in the summer, that's way before sunset.
Yeah, so I'm, there could be a conflict between F and G.
So maybe we can just make sure that those,
We can double check. I mean, this is what the
Or
fire
comply with
marshal,
what the fire marshal says when you call to get them, you know, just
Yeah, we-
comply with,
we can check on that.
yeah.
I mean, they actually reviewed this and this is how they wanted
And
to
no
work.
later than 2 hours before sunset.
Yeah, I just know that the recording says when it has to be out by.
By whatever you're told, or no later than 2 hours before sunset.
Yeah, something like that.
Potentially to answer your question, absolutely. But before I write off the whole goals section altogether, I do want to check in with Kelly to see what he would actually like to say and propose and what he needs from us.
But it'd be okay for her to.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Got to
Yes, thank
figure
you.
out how to get rid of a 11-year deficit for tomorrow.
Well, good luck. And
The
Have a
federal
good night.
government will make up the difference. Right, Dan? Pardon? The federal government will make up the difference. with the
Yeah,
county.
federal government is causing a lot of havoc.
Yes, they are.
So just real quick on the burn thing, you guys probably won't see it again. I mean, you had minimal changes anyways, but we're gonna make the changes and then bring it before the city council at a work session. So you guys will probably see it next.
Okay.
And then after that, as Commissioner Malone pointed out, it's not in the development code, so it's not gonna come before you for a hearing for adoption. But moving forward, I do, when it's kind of quasi related to things that you guys, I just like getting more opinions and more minds on it, so I thank you guys for looking at it.
The sign code is it?
Sign code will be a set, yeah, that's the same thing when we brought that before you guys. That was something you technically didn't have to review, but I think you had a lot of value and a lot of input on it.
Thank you.
Because I think you guys found several things tonight that probably wouldn't have otherwise been found even if it went to city council, so it's definitely worth it. So on the goals, so this is kind of an interesting thing. So back in January, we talked to you guys, the last meeting we had about the goals. We then went to city council and they put together a goal list. So I've broken them into 3 categories: ongoing administrative goals, long-range planning projects, and code modifications. Code modifications are kind of interesting because in some ways some of them fit into the ongoing administrative goals, and some of them also fit into the long-range planning project goals, and some of them fit into neither. So it's kind of just an interesting list. Under the code modifications, I put tentative timelines for when we'd be bringing them before you, or I'm hopeful at least we'd be bringing them before you. Under the other ones, I didn't do that. One thing that is one of the shortcomings, I think, of the goal setting sessions at not only this city, but at other cities I've also worked at, is you get the goal lists, which are great. And I think like the city just put like 70 goals or something like that for all the departments. But it's pretty consistent. I've never, at least in my tenure in working in government, I've never seen a priority list. So they put all these goals out there, but then they don't tell you how to prioritize the goals. Exactly. So I guess what I would like from the planning commission is not to set the goal list, the priority list, but to give Patrick and I some input on what you think are things that we should be prioritizing.
So the council didn't give priorities in their goal setting?
No.
Because they should be setting the priorities and passing them down to the boards that report to them.
That could be another way to do it, yeah.
That
Yeah.
would seem like the logical way to do it, because they're the ones that are elected.
So now there, if
But
you
a lot
look,
of these came from the planning commission too.
some came from the planning commission, some came from council directly, some came from staff, and then they all made the goal list. So some of the goals are kind of all encompassing, right? So if you look at the last two bullet points on ongoing administrative goals. Ensure compliance with state legislation and regulatory mandates through code amendments that are responsible and reflect the community's values. Okay. So if you go to the code modifications, the FEMA one's doing that. That's, I mean, it wasn't legislation, but it was a court order. What was the other one? There was another one in here.
How about the,
Oh.
I'm sorry,
The developing short-term rental regulations. So if that passes as a housing production strategy, that would be a regulatory thing per legislation. And then if you go to the next one, continue to improve and refine code language, policies and practices related to code enforcement. You could lump a bunch of these under that one. Sign code, urban forestry. And the reason why I say you can lump a lot of them is because with how some of these code sections are written, they're written very well. A few of them, it does create a lot of confusion for code enforcement because they're not as clear as they could be defined. So that's how I'd fit a lot of these under. And then you have other ones like, what's the other one? Modify chapter 836 outdoor burning, which we were just talking about.
Mhm.
That was actually set as a separate goal by the council that didn't fall into one of the two buckets on the other punch list.
I would say one of the things that you could do as far as for setting which one should be done, if it's a goal or something that's been on the list through a few budget cycles but never got completed, for example, take action to update the city's zoning map. I think that would move up the ladder to be a priority for some people on the council to get the zoning map done, because that was in the budget as a budget item in the 23-25. So, I mean, or whatever, the previous budget, there was money in there for it then. And so in this current one, it should be done and probably moved up so that it doesn't show up on the 28, 27, 29 budget.
I think that's a great idea.
I could also, I think it's a fine, great idea. I could also see an argument where if nobody's actually prioritized it for many, many years, why should we all of a sudden start to prioritize it?
Well, the mayor has prioritized it.
I'm
So,
not saying,
yeah, I'm just
I'm just saying that
I just know that
The
the
opposite
mayor
of
has
that.
prioritized it, so it would probably behoove.
Yeah, on that one, I'm not exactly, I will just be honest with this group, I'm not positive exactly what that means. So I think the first step is defining what that exactly means. Because taking action to update the city zoning map, I think could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
I think it primarily means, do we have the right inventory for the different
Yeah, and
sections of the zoning?
I would
Are we
agree.
Too heavy to high density and not heavy enough in the lower density or vice versa. Just
would-
make sure it balances.
I would agree with that, except we just did the HCA a year ago and the EOA a year ago, and it showed that we have surpluses in all our zones. So that's where I'm a little bit now like, okay, so what does this goal mean? So it's almost like we need
We need
we need
clarification.
a work session around what does this goal mean
Yeah,
to different people on the council,
clarify, it. yeah.
and then give us clarity, so then Patrick and I have marching orders to go do what we need to do, and then get you guys all in the loop and get working on it. Cause I'm fine taking it on, I just don't exactly know what that means.
I would see clarification.
yeah, for me, since you're asking us what our priorities are, so I'm gonna give my opinions. I think what I see that maybe not already planned out, because I think there are a few things that are already planned out and kind of on your tentative list, such as alternative wastewater systems. I think the big one for me on this is develop a clear policy for ERU allocation. I think that one, the sooner the better, would be helpful for me. And then I think there's a lot of other great ones on here, some of them that you just, like you were saying, have to complete, even like to complete the housing production strategy. That's just gonna get done regardless. But the two related to emergency management, so bullet points 2 and 3 in long range planning. I think it's easy And maybe this is to your point about zoning, I think it's easy to put off some of these long range things because they take a long time and you want to clear out all the easy stuff first. But then you just end up clearing out easy stuff and never getting to some of those long range or longer term things that take a while to kind of get through. So maybe starting the process with some of those.
There's gonna be stuff that's gonna come out of HPS for sure.
Yeah.
There should be anyways, something comes out of there that's gonna be important to pass through planning commission, sure. On that, I don't see like apply for ODOT Safe Routes to School grant. You guys will never know the difference
Well, and the other
for
thing
doing
is,
that. If we have time to do it or if it comes up.
we've gotten
We
them
will do that.
before, and I'm just wondering where the holes are, because 18 years ago, we got a Safe Routes to Schools grant from ODOT. They did all the sidewalks along Pleasant to get to, of course, it's not a school site anymore. Cedar Ridge School and the high school, and
Did you get a,
what schools within the city limits don't have a safe route to school?
did you get a Safe Routes to School grant, or did you get a CBGD grant?
We got a safe routes to
Huh,
school
okay.
sidewalk.
I
It
never
was a
heard that.
sidewalk grant, but it was. I've
I
been
know
out,
the city's got
I've
a
been
lot
out
of,
for 15 years, and it was probably 10 years before, so it's been 25 years ago.
okay, because I know a lot of grants we got in the past for the CDBG block grant money. I was not
Yeah, well,
aware,
but that was when we were a smaller city,
yeah, I was not aware of any Safe Routes to School grants we've gotten in the past, but I can look into
a
that.
long time ago.
I can ask ODOT on that. Yeah, I think the last two bullet points on that are probably the least on my list.
I think the Pleasant Street Master Plan should really start with like Economic Development Board
Mhm.
to have a vision for it, because I think it was pretty clear at the budget committee that the current vision for Pleasant Street is,
And when we have more ERUs.
yeah, is not there at the moment. And so I think before even doing anything with it, it seems like a revisioning of
It didn't get fleshed out. At the
Yeah,
time-
of
At
what-
the time of development.
of what
I mean-
a new plan would look like would make sense before looking at anything planning commission related to it.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with any of that. That one's actually a confusing one to me because it was put as a goal. And then I heard recently from a couple council members, they didn't, oh, that's not a goal. And it's like, as the city manager said at one of the meetings, yeah, that was set as a goal. So that one I kind of want to stay away from for the time being because
Certification.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a lot of buy-in on it.
Consensus
I think-
Yeah.
Yeah.
does not exist.
Any other thoughts from the group?
On the code modifications list, do you guys have any thoughts on that? That was actually probably what I wanted to input on more than anything. The FEMA stuff, that's coming before you next month, and so is the alternative wastewater systems. So it's like check, those already been noticed, they're coming before you soon. The two after that, we talked about tonight, so we're planning on bringing those forth this year. And then sign code, that's like the can that gets kept getting kicked down the road.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting on the attorney for,
Urban forestry's a good one because of the fact of the tree retention and not retaining enough trees and they fall down and take out a couple of houses or whatever.
yeah,
I
the
don't know
urban.
what that, is that part of the urban forestry?
Mhm. The urban forestry one is difficult, I
Yeah.
will say.
Didn't we look at part of that or something fairly recently?
I had a whole committee for urban forestry. Were you on that?
No.
It was difficult. And the reason why is because you get people that are really into saving trees and people that want to cut every tree down, and somehow I got all those people on the committee. And so there was never any agreement on anything. So we couldn't really advance anything. We met probably 6-7 times. And it kind of got to the point of, well, what are you suggesting we advance to the planning commission and city council?
You
And there
need
was,
to have the sheriff on the committee.
I actually just want the committee to be the planning commission. Because then whatever you come up with will then be forwarded to the city council for their consideration. I think having a separate committee on that is a disaster because I already did that.
Because you do get you want to have it balanced, but you end up then just getting this.
Exactly. And if we do it at the planning commission level, then we can invite the public to come and speak and give you their input. And then you can take it or leave it. But then you guys have authority to kind of hold the meeting and say, we've heard everybody's input, but at the end of the day, we're gonna make the decision on what advances.
to the city council and they can say, we don't like what you did.
Exactly, they
Yeah.
can still do that.
Yeah.
So that's what I would
No matter
prefer
what.
personally. We'll have to talk
That'd
to
be fine.
the council about that, but that's what I would prefer.
Can you speak a little bit on what needs to be done with the addressing code to standardize addressing code?
We don't have an addressing code
Oh.
currently,
Okay. that makes sense.
so. Most cities, you know. Decent size, even smaller cities, some cities have an addressing code. All our code says is that we assign addresses. And then what we've historically done is just follow what other cities do.
We have that list of names that can be used. And then sometimes we misuse them, like Strawbridge is supposed to be Strobridge, STROW Bridge. That got made, what was on the permitted list of uses was Strobridge, which was a pioneer name. And they just changed it to Straw.
Yeah, so about 10 years ago, we started doing thematic. Names for new subdivisions at the direction of. The fire district and the police department.
That's where Rachel and Kimberly.
They wanted to get rid of names like of family members because it just confuses them. So that's why when you see a lot of new subdivisions, it'll be like. The one off Ponder Lane, it's all salmon. Species. The new one out Cedar Creek Heights, it's all different rivers in Oregon. So,
Something easy to
Sandy,
remember, so
yeah,
when they're driving
exactly.
through, they're like, well, I remember that one.
exactly right. So that's the reason for doing thematic names, and that's what emergency responders want.
Look for the smoke out by the salmon streets.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what it is. It's really, there's nothing in our code either. If we had to readdress something. We're just relying on how Clackamas County does it,
Okay.
but there's nothing on the books. So we had one property owner that got very upset when we readdressed her address a couple years ago. And she was like, what code authorized you to do this? Well, there's a code that says we can readdress. But she wanted to know like how we made the decision to do that. And there's really
So she
nothing,
had to change all of her letterhead and everything.
right? So, but there's nothing to point to in our code. You know, we had an email from the fire district saying there's been some ambulance calls and they can't find this place. So that was our reasoning for doing it. Well, not that place, but one of her neighbors' houses.
Yeah.
And so we did it, but we just wanted to make it codified.
Makes sense.
Another example of that is, and I don't know if it's still true, but there was a time when DeBarco, the green signs, some said road and some said either avenue or boulevard. You could see two different signs in the city for the same street.
Well, that just recently happened with 362nd. So it's 362nd Drive, but somehow one of the construction plans, it got marked as Avenue north of the highway. And when they ordered the signs, they ordered Avenue signs.
Oh.
I think we've actually already rectified it, but yeah, same thing.
I'll say as in a former life as a 911 dispatcher, addressing is close at heart for me. And so I'm definitely okay with this, although 362nd Avenue does make sense to me since it follows the Portland addressing system of avenues being numbered and streets being named. So I just assumed that was the way it was supposed to be.
So in Sandy, just so the education, everybody on the commission is all new streets that are north-south are avenue and all streets that are east-west are street.
Right now.
Yeah, that's how Portland.
But that was
or
the-
Multnomah County really.
That was an existing street and we couldn't get the county to change drive to avenue, so we just had to.
And where is zero?
Zero.
Yeah, like my house is 37390. Well,
Burnside.
from what? Is it division? Is it the
Burnside.
river?
Burnside.
Start
Burns-
and
Burnside for north-south? Yeah,
It's all the way downtown Portland, yeah.
Yeah,
so
and
one,
then other ways the limit.
unless you have some
No, all the way
road
to the river.
neighborhoods.
So 362nd would be 366.
There are some
362
road
blocks of
neighborhoods
limit.
in Gresham that do not follow that.
Yes,
There are some
Old.
road neighborhoods that decide to go their own way, especially in the northwest area
they're
of
the
Gresham.
the older neighborhoods.
Hey
yeah.
Jared,
I know
if you
that
ever,
would be an
if you ever
amazing
want to see the
location.
map, we have the big grid map upstairs. You can
oh,
come in
I
and check it out.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
it's
have-
kind of interesting.
That's an updated one. I have an old one of those maps rolled up upstairs. It's laminated. But I think it's been promised to Don Hokinson, so.
All right, we have drifted.
Yes.
Anything else you need, Kelly?
No, I think that gave us direction and I think the comments that were made, I think give us some clarity and give some direction, so I appreciate it.
All right. I think that is the last item on our list. Last up is adjourned, so it's 8:39. Let's go home.
Thank you.